I don't know. I'm partial to soccer because I'm passionate about it.
I know when I was growing up, we didn't have strong, confident female role models. I followed my big brother around, who's 2 years older than me, and whether it was playing street hockey, tackle football, you name it, I was always on his heels, dying to get in the game.
Say you're going in the wrong direction because it was halftime and we switched our direction, and I'd forgotten about that. And I was on this dead breakaway.
You can get 5 coaches in the same room, and we all thought 5 different opinions on maybe how Kerry Taylor was as a player.
I was a great player.
And then when I got off the field, she would say, "You did so great. I loved watching you play." No matter, I could have the worst game of my life.
And it was the president of the Deaf Soccer Association asking if I'd be interested in the volunteer job that was the head coach of the deaf team. And I actually was extremely excited.
I'm Kerry Taylor, and this is Women Talking Football. And thanks for tuning in tonight. You are listening and hopefully watching on Facebook, Women Talking Football. Tonight we have a special guest. Linda Hamilton is going to be calling in. She is coaching at Southwestern University, and she's actually a old coach and mentor of mine. So I'm so excited to have her calling in tonight. It's going to be a great show. I'm probably going to have to pay her some money so she doesn't tell bad stories about me back in college. So, Mom, if you're listening, you might need some earplugs. So we're just waiting for Linda to call in tonight, and we're going to talk about her travels. She does a lot of work with the U.S. Soccer envoy, and I think she just got back from Vietnam, where she was working on behalf of the U.S. She's a former women's national team player and was actually on the 1991 World Cup team that won in China. So the very first World Cup women's gold medal, she was on that team. So I'm going to pick her brain about that, and we're going to talk about college recruiting. She coaches at Southwestern University, which is a Division III school, and we're going to talk a little bit about how that works out in the recruiting craziness of trying to get youth soccer players into your school. So we're just going to wait for her to call in. And I might ask her, actually, also there's big news this week with FIFA, and Moya Dodd was running for a seat on the FIFA council, and that kind of didn't go too well. So I'm going to hit Linda up with that question very soon. So while we are waiting for her, I want to thank some of my sponsors. So I want to give a shout out to Soccer Nation. They do awesome work, and Soccer Loco. If you want equipment, you can check out Soccer Loco. And also, I got a new sponsor this week called Kings Pro, and they're on my website. So if you go to womentalkingfootball.com online, you can click on Kings Pro, and they actually do customized shin guards. You can get really cool shin guards and get them customized. And if you give the promo code WO Talk Football in all caps, that will get you in for Kings Pro. So we are going to wait for Linda to call in. Zaid, can I call her? Okay. Oh, here she is. Perfect. Hello.
Hello.
Welcome to Women Talking Football.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to talk to you. So I warned my mom, who listens to the show. I'm like, Mom, you might have to put on earmuffs if you don't want to hear any bad college stories about me. So, but we won't go there. So, Linda Hamilton, welcome to the show. Typically what I do is I ask the guests to give a little background about what their soccer background is and a little bit about themselves. So, can you give me your basic soccer background?
Yeah, sure. I grew up in the South, so I started in New Orleans and then was in Atlanta. Played youth soccer, went to college at North Carolina State and graduated from UNC. So was played at two schools and went on to continue playing on the U.S. national team and got to play in the first World Cup in '91 and the second World Cup in 1995 in Sweden, and then retired after too many knee injuries and went on into coaching and coached at several colleges. I've coached at Division I, and I am currently the head women's soccer coach for Southwestern University in Georgetown, Texas, and enjoying life right outside of Austin, Texas. So that's what I'm doing now, and fortunate to let soccer continue to open doors and let me travel, as I've been fortunate to be a part of the U.S. sports diplomacy programs, which send sports envoys to a variety of countries that want to try to further relations using soccer as the medium. So it's great to be able to give back a little bit as well.
Right. Somewhere sprinkled in there was an Olympic gold medal, right? I think you forgot. I think you forgot that.
No, I actually didn't. I retired right after this World Cup in Sweden, which was '95. So I was not a part of the inaugural Olympics, which was in Atlanta in '96.
Okay.
And that was, I think, actually maybe the smallest roster at that first Olympics. They only had 16 on it.
Oh, okay. I got that wrong somewhere. For some reason, I thought you played on that team. So.
Yeah, I had retired right after the '95 World Cup.
Right.
Played a little bit beyond, but not into the Olympics. And actually, when the '95 World Cup happened, at that point, women's soccer had not been added to the Olympics yet. And as you know, it was only a year later.
Right.
So that all happened really fast between the World Cup in '95 and then when the Olympics hit Atlanta in '96.
Yeah. So we won't totally talk about your national team experience, but I know you and I have had many conversations about like what it was like to be on that 91 team and the differences in like, you know, winning a World Cup and coming home to that airport versus, you know, the ticker tape parade that the women got in 2015. Like, can you talk about being, you know, in at that very, you know, it was like a startup level. Can you kind of share your experiences about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was, you know, we were part of a team that really started in 1984.
Right.
So it was pretty young, even when the group of youth, which was myself and Mia Hamm and Christine Lilly and Julie Foudy and Joey Fawcett, the five of us were moved up from the youth national team. But, I mean, talk about a world of difference. You're talking that we had two national teams at that point, an under-19 team and then the full national team. So we were part of something that, you know, we didn't know what it was going to become. We knew we were at the start, though.
Right.
I mean, it was evident we were at the beginning, and we knew that we were lucky to even be a group. You know, there was a group of women, you know, that got to play in college that missed out, you know, just on it. So we knew this was the start. We did not know maybe how that was going to translate, but in the moment, we were excited to be a part of it. We were excited when we would travel outside of the United States because we got to get $15 a day to pay us instead of the normal $10 a day if we were in the United States. So
right.
We always enjoyed that. I mean, you know, you're talking about it, and most of us were, you know, we got bumped up, the five of us, as youth players or from the U19 team, but most of the players were currently in college or just recently graduated. Right. So it was not a profession by any means. It was a labor of love, I guess, to play. Now, right. What it felt like in the moment was just like I think it feels now. You feel fortunate to be representative of your country, and even though it wasn't big from a maybe outsider's perspective, it was big within the walls of soccer itself.
Right.
So, those experiences of traveling the longest, slowest route to get anywhere on 5 different commercial airlines because that was the cheapest way. We carried 50 extra bags of equipment that we all carried. In addition to that, there was one equipment manager. And, it was...
Yeah, you didn't have a social media person or this or that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and they've got like 50 equipment people now.
Right.
But it was something that we knew. The one thing I can tell you I knew is I'd never played with more talented players in my life.
Right.
From, Michelle Akers to Mia and Lily to, Tiff Roberts and the group behind. But the real inaugural Michelle and April and Karen Gabera and, Shannon Higgins and Lori Henrys and all of those.
Yeah, Tracy Bates. Yeah.
I knew I was and Carl Overbeck and Tracy Bates. I mean, just, I knew honestly that it wasn't just about best players in the United States. I knew I was playing with some of the best players in the world.
Right.
And we had a lot on our team.
Right.
So I knew we were going to be able to do something maybe that hadn't been done before. I think it sort of had become, I think it was only about 1989 or so where Anson had worked with, and Anson was coaching college full time. Yeah. I mean, it was a part-time gig, but we fought to get in a World Cup, and that's how the Atlanta Olympics came about, because they knew they needed to have 2 World Cups before it could become an Olympic sport.
Okay.
And so there was a real hustle to get it for 91 so that you could fit in another World Cup before
in
the
95.
next Olympics. So, yeah. So it was, I have to say, you look back now and you see how far it's come in just 27 years and you think, I mean, it's amazing because it's come so far. But I also recognize, and Anson was a big part of that. Tony was a big part. They had always said, you're going to be a part of something that is going to be big, and it's going to change the face and landscape of the game, and it might not be during your time. And it was something that you kind of always knew,
right, that
it was going to turn into something. And I had said all along, if any sponsors would be smart, they'd jump on, these All-American players and women and athletes that have Julie Foudy deferring Stanford Med School and,
right,
Joy Fawcett, changing the landscape of women's soccer forever for professional players and moms.
Yep.
She single-handedly changed it with a coach that had some foresight that felt Joy was more important and didn't care, didn't worry about her having a baby. He just knew what a great player she was.
Right.
And so all of these sort of pieces went into, what now is obviously a place where these women can make a living. I mean, we weren't making a living. We had to have bosses that let us leave 2 weeks at a time with not a whole lot of notice to, time to train every day. So
yeah. Didn't you work at Home Depot or something during that?
I was offered a Home Depot position. In fact, I took the position in Michigan,
yep,
with the club in lieu of the Home Depot, because at the time, gosh, don't let me be an investor. At the time, I didn't know what Home Depot was.
Right.
I sure as heck don't know how to build anything, and thought, this sounds like a terrible place for me to work. But
right,
it was at the start of the Olympic Job Opportunities Program,
right,
that women's soccer was now being inaugurated into that. So, but I did, you had to work at anything and rely on you. Thank goodness all of us had family stability to be able to help, curb that, because we were definitely college graduates trying to play soccer, and obviously not making a living at that. So we were trying to find a job that allowed us to have that flexibility.
Yeah, a job like coaching the University of Michigan club team, which you did back in '93.
Exactly right.
Where you were my coach.
Exactly right. And, you know, I think, and that was at the start of women's soccer's, you know, sort of quick escalation into how many colleges added the program. I mean, at the time, University of Michigan, as you said, it was only a club program, and that's what you organized and ran. And I was amazed that, you know, I was about to be interviewed by a couple of upcoming seniors or juniors at a college, and I thought, all right, I'm game for that. You know, I admired the business side that you guys sort of ran it like a business, and we tried
our best. Yeah.
You know, but you didn't allow that. Maybe it wasn't something that was there. You didn't let that stop you from trying to create a program, and obviously we became. You know, I was fortunate in that year too, but we were super competitive and went to national title in it. So, you know, it wasn't just recreation. I think it was just like you guys recognize that if nobody complains or nobody makes a demand for it, maybe the school doesn't know that that's something they should add. And in our case, we had to maybe prove a little bit to the U.S. Soccer Federation that we were a marketable, viable asset, not just a drain. And, you know, at the time, you know, remember too, soccer in the U.S. was not remotely as popular.
Yeah, it was still very in its, you know, infancy
very young,
state.
And I mean, even very young, and at the time, I mean, you still had people saying girls don't play sports. You know, I mean, I know we're forward thinking, but you know, it wasn't that long ago that it was like weird for young women to be involved in athletics of any kind, or you would immediately be stereotyped. So I think it's like anything. What I will say, and I think this is true both in the college game of women's soccer and women's soccer in general, I mean, it has grown exponentially with fan base as well as popularity, as well as, quite frankly, their abilities. And I think the level has completely, you know, evolved over the last quarter of a century as well, from competitiveness among each other and around the world, but also just in general as soccer players. I mean, I think the players today on our national team and around the world, the best national teams are some of the most complete players that, you know, have ever been together. We had some that match those criteria, but on the whole scale, it's just a higher level overall.
Right.
And I think that's an impressive step in the right direction. And you know, what you and I've talked about is, without having what we went through for 91 and 95 and, you know, those early days of not being paid and not being salaried, you know, somebody has to be first.
Right.
There's some positives. We get to be in, I still remember Anson saying this, there will only always be the first ever Women's World Cup champions, and that can be you guys.
Yeah. That just gave me chills.
You know, and you're like, what are we playing for? We never played for fans anyway.
Right.
So in a way, we were coming up in an environment that we didn't know it could be better, and we didn't know it should be better, or we didn't know we were under. I mean, we're smart enough to know, obviously, we were not being paid the same as the men and those kinds of things. But we were not bitter about it, I guess, at the time. It was like, hey, I'm grateful to have a chance because of, you know, 5 years before me, somebody didn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
So each generation is sort of grateful for what you have. And what I'm also grateful for is that it set up the next generation to maybe not have to have those same struggles.
Yeah. And I think that's the key is like kind of breaking down the challenges so the people that come behind you don't have to like go through the same muck that you did. And I'll always remember this. So I think it was fall in 93 when you coached us at Michigan. I believe so.
Yeah. I think that's right.
Yeah. And I'll never forget, like, because at that time you guys didn't have like extensive training camps and you did like most all of your training on your own. And there's There's one memory that will always stick with me. I think it was like you would finish training us as players, and then you would go out on the field and you would run 120s, you know, full field sprints by yourself and time yourself. And I just, I remember like this so distinctly going, holy crap, how hard is that? Like you were having to do all these different things, and yet you had to work on your own fitness, and you had to like make sure that when you went in, you know, a couple days before your game, because it wasn't like a 10-day or a 2-week camp, that you always had to be prepared. So like I will always remember that of watching you just like grind it out so that you could go and like, oh, where's your coach? She's, you know, with the national team this weekend. And I don't know, that memory will always stick with me of just like watching you grind after you finished a, you know, 2-hour training session with us.
Right. Well, and you know, I mean, multiply it by 20, right? And spread it across the country, that we all were having to do that because, you know, you're exactly right, that we didn't have, and some of it was we didn't have the knowledge, some of it was the resources, some of it was they didn't spend the resources on us because we were an unknown commodity. So, yeah, I mean, it is one of those things, like you look back, and I sometimes look back and think, God, those days were a grind. But in the moment, you know, I think that's why you do things when you're younger. In the moment, listen, I was just lucky that I was having an opportunity to continue to pursue the national team after college, because in a lot of cases up until then, once you were done in college, you've lost your best training ground.
Yeah.
You've lost all the training and all the practice. So once you graduated college,
you were done.
You were done.
Yeah.
It was like, okay, now you can go use your college degree.
Right.
And, you know, I think I was part of the generation that we weren't sure what we should have been doing, but we did not want to start using our college degree yet.
Right.
We were trying to find a way to still play, and the college rules were a little different at the time. So there were, you know, if you stuck around your university, you had a built-in training facilities. You were able to use those kinds of things. You had your coaches. You used to be able to train with the team, you know, the college teams, before rules got more stringent.
Right.
So there were ways to do it, which is why we all ended up doing, not all, but most of us were finding ways within coaching, because at least it was easier to finish training you guys and then get out and
run your sprints and run your sprints.
Yeah, and run my sprints rather than coming from an office and then having to, you know, at least I was already dressed for the occasion.
Yeah. I never felt bad when you used to run us, because I was like, well, she's running after us. So if she can do it, I can do
it. I remember people would always ask me, why not do it with you? But for me, it needed to be separate. I didn't ever want to be a player coach. And it felt like, for me, I guess, in order to organize it best, it was better to organize it as I'm coaching you guys and then I'm training myself.
Right.
And, you know, I don't know. I think other people were able to, you know, mix and match if they wanted to, or those kinds of things. But for me, it just felt better, or it felt, I don't know, and you know this too, when you start running and you're doing it, it's different. You can't be the same kind of motivator. Well, at least I can't be. Maybe Tracy Leo and Tracy Bates.
Like, come on, everybody, let's go. Yeah.
Me personally, I cannot be a motivator when I'm trying to get through it myself.
Right.
And that's, you know, that's maybe my flaw on that. So, you know, it made more sense to me to sort of keep it separate and do that as well.
So let's spin the conversation into college coaching, and I wanted you to be able to talk about your school, where you're at now, and maybe talk about the differences between, you know, recruiting at the Division III level versus Division I or Division II, because I think a lot of people don't kind of understand the differences between the levels, and how it's, you know, how the recruiting cycle is a little bit different, and what Division III soccer positives are, because I think it often gets overlooked as an option for young soccer players today.
Right. Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm at currently a small private liberal arts school right outside of Austin in Georgetown, Texas. It's called Southwestern University. We have about 1,600 students, and about 1/3 of our student body population are student athletes. We compete in 20 sports, and we compete in the Southern Collegiate Athletic Conference, which would include mostly Texas schools, and then we sneak over to Shreveport, Louisiana for Centenary, and then up to Colorado for Colorado College, which ironically I never play because another trivia, Colorado College women's soccer competes at Division I, but the rest of their sports compete at D3.
Right.
Which can really confuse your listeners now, but and that some schools can even do that. But I think the Division III model, the biggest thing for people to understand or recognize is the difference. It's not about a competitive spirit or nature. It is actually about athletic scholarships, and that Division III, no Division III school, it is part of being a Division III school, there are no athletic scholarships given.
Right.
Now, all Division III schools give academic scholarships, but there is no athletic supplement or additional. And that it is a truly, even you would get what you would get at my school no matter how much I want you to be a soccer player for me.
Right.
There's no influence or input from a soccer coach or an athletic coach at Division III in that way. I mean, there's always an influence in that by being a part of a team, it might allow you to be in a admissible state, but it has nothing to do with the kind of support you get. At
Right.
Division I, Division II, and even NAIA, there are athletic scholarships. Now, the big thing people need to understand, though, for women's soccer is a scholarship is allowed to be divided up. So you could put one person on a full ride, or two people on a half, or four people on a quarter, or 10 people all on $100.
Right.
It can be broken up by a dollar figure. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing. And there's a maximum number at 14 that the Division I allows. That does not mean that every school has 14 to give, though, which I think also gets confused for people.
Right.
And then you brought up from the competitive level. The truth is, there are players playing at Division III, and some of the top Division III schools are absolutely not just competitive, but would beat, no question in my mind, would beat many Division I schools.
Right.
The top Division III school, though, would not beat the top Division I school. That just would not happen. It is a different level of athlete on that when you're talking the best at Division I and those programs, and then the best at Division III. But it would be they can be competitive. And I think what people might misunderstand is that we don't have anything to play for. I mean, there's a Division III NCAA championship that actually in the women's soccer world is harder at Division III because there's more teams at Division III than even at Division I. There's over 450 Division III programs across the country, and at Division I think there's about 390.
Right.
So it's actually even a tougher. There's a bigger bracket, but I think like anything, the real trick is to find the place that you feel you're gonna have the tools you need to be successful in life. And I think that sometimes the Division III world fits for some players that even could play Division I.
Right.
Because they might want to play, like I have one of my student athletes, actually she was a freshman this year, she was the newcomer of the year for our conference in soccer. She just finished also playing tennis, where she played number 1 and number 2 and became both the newcomer of the year in women's tennis and the player of the year for women's tennis.
Wow.
So she's one of a very few athletes that have played, and she's just a first year. She's now received in the 2 sports she's played all conference honors and the superlative awards. So she would not have been able to play both tennis and soccer at Division One.
Right.
I think she would be capable of doing it,
But
and
the
I actually
time,
think
yeah.
I think some Division One school is missing out because they might not have let her.
Right.
But I think she could have been great at doing that, and you just don't have the other thing that happens at Division Three. It's a little more restrictive on time. It really has a lower or less intense season in the spring specifically, where we only train for 16 actual practices, versus a Division One. It's another mini season for 5 or 6 weeks.
Right.
So there's some time restrictions on the Division Three level, but the other thing that opens up is, as a Division Three coach, I can start recruiting kids the moment they enter their freshman year in high school, by text, by phone calls, by emails. And the reason that's true for all Division Three coaches is because we're not incentivizing with athletic scholarships, so there's no advantage for us in that way.
What are your thoughts? Because I used to coach Division Three. I used to coach Division One, and you know, many years ago. But it seems like now coaches are getting players to commit to schools like in their 9th grade year.
Yeah.
And that baffles me. And it really, like, 9th graders don't even know what they want to eat for breakfast in the morning, let alone like what school they want to go to or what major they want to have. And it changes the next day. Like, they could love Rice Krispies one day and the next day they're loving their Wheaties, and you know. And so what are kind of your thoughts on that? And from the D3 perspective, generally, don't you recruit players kind of later in their high school years?
Yeah, my thoughts are that it is happening, and it is sadly happening, where kids are committing to some of the top schools earlier and earlier, even when they're not able to, quote, have contact with the coaches.
Yeah, through their club coaches.
It is a reality.
Yeah.
From the Division III perspective, you're right. We're later because of our requirements that it be academic. I mean, the first thing is, as you know, not everybody gets into Michigan that applies. Well, we're in a top 50 school in the country, so not everybody gets into my school when they apply either. And so it has to be later, at least. You know, they can't even fill out the application for their senior year. So in a way, a lot of Division IIIs were stuck talking about if you can get in, where you certainly have a set of numbers to hit, from SAT scores to, you know, grades and GPA. But my school is a liberal arts school, and quite frankly, they do take into consideration extracurricular things, and they take into consideration charitable things and other outside interests. So it really isn't just a matter of this number on a test score and this number on the GPA. So that becomes difficult, but that's why you have a Division III model, where we're looking for kids getting most of our verbal commitments and in a kid's junior year. But most of the Division I's are actually completed their recruiting for kids, starting with kids, you know, verbally committed in the sophomore years, meaning most Division I's already have their 2018 class verbally committed today as we're speaking. And a majority of their 2019 recruiting class narrowed down, and possibly some verbal commits on that as well. The problem I have with it, as you know, is women's soccer and women's players, they develop differently, and you know, it's a lot of pressure. The other thing that I find happening when I was a club coach is a kid was playing hard and doing all the right things until they got their scholarship offer, and then they would stop.
Right.
Well, that's just not going to be a recipe for success. And they thought that the goal was to get a college scholarship offer. That's what their goal was.
Right.
Which I think is an incorrect goal to have. It also leaves you less motivated, obviously, if you think it's just about the offer. And many kids end up being disappointed, or a disappointment to the place where they go.
Yeah. So there's a question that just came in from Facebook. Are you familiar with the new lacrosse recruiting rules? And do you think for NCAA, and do you think other sports might kind of go down that road soon? I think they put some restrictions on like when kids are able to commit?
I cannot say I'm entirely familiar with what the lacrosse restrictions are. What I will say is it doesn't matter what the restrictions are. Coaches find a way around it. And my example will be in women's soccer, kids are not allowed to be phoned or texted by Division I coaches until and even emailed until their junior, sophomore year for emails and phone calls, their junior year. But I have many, many, many college coaches that will talk to you, the club coach,
right,
and ask you to have, Mary Smith call me on Mondays at 4 p.m. every Monday.
Yeah.
So it's set up through you, or I will text you and ask you to go ahead and have will you text your kid to call me now?
Yep.
So I don't say this in judgment. Coaches find a way around some of those restrictions, and they're doing that regularly because we're still having sophomores already verbally committed.
Yeah. I read something today where there was a kid who committed and who's graduating class of 2020. And I was just like, wait, what year is it? And I had to do the math. I'm like, this is insane. I don't know. And I talk to people that are coaching in Division I, and I'm not being judgmental because I'm not in the college game anymore, but they say, well, if we don't do it, then the next person's going to. So we need that kid.
Well,
so we have to
that's right.
We have to go into this vicious cycle. And it's just like, well, are you going to recruit kids in 6th grade eventually? Like, when is enough?
Right.
So.
Well, and you're right. And that's why I said initially, it does exist and it's happening and it's there. And it doesn't matter what a coach feels about it. If they're not doing it, they might miss out on that kid. Absolutely. And so it is a vicious cycle because even as coaches, it would be difficult to get a unanimous Division I coaches agreement that no one will take a verbal commitment, and you
right.
won't recruit kids until, that's just an unrealistic expectation. So those Division I coaches, whether you like it or not, and I had to do the same thing. When I was coaching at Division I, I'm sure you did too. It's not that I didn't like it, but I sure did it as rigorously as anyone else because I am competitive, and if you wait, then you will miss out on the top players coming out of, your area.
Right.
Now, that being said, as a Division III coach, it does not mean that I don't recruit what I would consider any top player here. I write to anyone and everyone that I think is a talented athlete that can help me.
Mm-hmm.
The difference is some of the top players here are also being recruited by other schools, but now I get an advantage by getting to them by their freshman year.
Mm-hmm.
I can have communications with them on a regular basis. So I similarly still feel I put my name in and throw my ring in the hat because I want to be a competitive program. But sometimes as players continue in their development, other schools get interested and we become lower on their list, which is fine.
Right.
I'm also fortunate to live in one of the best states, California being another top state for talented athletes, that there's not enough positions in colleges for all of the talented soccer players if they all decided to play college soccer.
Right.
Now, not all of them decide to do that, but you do start finding, kind of niches and places where you get a good relationship with a college coach, or it's the right fit for some kids, and then they go back and one kid brings another kid and that brings another kid, and you start building up those things, which also can contribute to this early decision, right? If you've known a club kid that you played with for 2 years, you just happen to be 2 years younger.
Right. Your friend might go to the school, and then that might influence you to go to that school. Yeah.
Yeah, you already know you've got someone there, so it's easier for you to say you could fit in, and that happened with me with my club team. I played up on an older team, so I felt super comfortable when I entered college.
Right.
I already knew that I was going to be good friends with the soccer team because, 3 or 4 were on my club team. So I think it's a little bit. The other thing is it's a frenzy that has happened where, because it's been happening now, teams and coaches and players, when one player starts getting recruited or makes their decision, everyone else panics.
Right. They're like, oh my gosh, I have to commit. I have to find a school too. And then
I haven't even gotten a letter. How could such and such already be committed to a school where nobody even contacted us?
Yeah.
I got to find a place, or I've got to make a choice right now.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, as you know, in this world that we live in, sometimes money talks, and it's about the status of saying you're on an athletic scholarship. And I can argue with you that, at my school, your grades could have gotten you $30,000 a year, of academic money. And you might be offered $4,000 of athletic money. I would argue that my $30,000 is much, much better, but it is not athletic scholarship. So the status is
right. Oh, I got offered this much money.
Scholarship.
Yeah.
Now,
yeah.
I don't know why you would brag about this. You are an academic scholarship recipient, so you can say you were receiving a scholarship.
Right.
I think
for your brains, not just for.
That's right. I'm giving you money for your grades and all your hard work and effort up until now in school. The Division I model gives you money to reward you also for what you do on the field.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying that I've enjoyed the transition at Division III. The kids are showing up because they really want to.
Right.
And they want to get better. And
Yeah.
they want to be competitive. So I've enjoyed that rather than having many conversations with team members that wanted to talk about their scholarship status.
Yeah. Like, I need more money, coach. Yeah. Or so-and-so's on this money and I'm only on this, but I'm scoring more goals.
Yeah.
Like that's just, that's insanity. So we have another question from Facebook, which is it's an interesting twist. The question is, and we can just kind of have a discussion about it. It says, does anyone have statistics of how many kids who were recruited as freshmen and sophomores actually turned out to be top collegiate players by their junior or senior years? Which I'm sure there aren't any statistics, but that would be a really interesting study to see, maybe those kids peaked early.
Do your capstone on that.
Yeah, exactly. Like, that would be a good research project to say, like, okay, maybe the kids that were recruited, as freshmen and sophomores were early bloomers, and, did they, peak early, or did they burn out? Or I've always wondered if there's if you could track the number of transfers versus when the kids committed to school, because I think that might be a really interesting statistic to look at too.
I agree. I think that it's a difficult thing, sadly, for somebody to track whether if they do burn out. Sometimes there's just not one year they're on a roster and the next year they don't.
Yeah.
We're also getting into, typically, if they're committing that early, there's probably some sort of athletic scholarship promise, and then
who knows?
You never know how that pans out.
Yeah. Who knows?
Yeah. But I think it would be a very interesting study to do, and I would venture to tell you that it might be as high as 50%.
Yeah.
Don't make it, if not even a higher percentage. I think it's a higher percentage that do not make it to being the top starter and 4-year starter for a college team. I would think it's less, it's a lower percentage that actually have that happen.
Right.
Because I think it's tough, and I do think there's other distractions, and I've seen too many kids at the club level that are psyched when they get their offer.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't realize that it actually gets a lot harder.
You mean I have to get up at 6 and go lift weights, and I have to do this and I have to do that, and I have to go to study table, and
And that's just to maintain.
Yep.
You know, you want to earn, or you're a little below, or you're not getting a start, or you're behind someone, and you've got to do even extra to get, you know, this is the one thing I will say. Most coaches don't play kids based on the scholarships that those kids are on.
Right.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Most coaches that I know, even if we've made a mistake and given a kid more than they should or more than their, quote, worth in the moment, or they're putting back, most of us, I can't, I do not know anyone that is in this field that wouldn't play their best players rather than do it based on their scholarship dollars.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing. Are you wanting to go to a place that you can say you're on some scholarship, but you never see the field?
Yeah. There's so many variables to think about, for sure. It's good.
Yeah,
good
and
stuff.
the thing that happens when you're a college coach is, remember, it's a business. So they might recruit 3 people, hoping one pays off.
Yep.
Right? They've got extra scholarship dollars to play with. They could put 3 people on, you know, all on $7,000 apiece. If some quit, they get that money back anyway.
Yeah.
And see who pans out, rather than some of these players, to the point, might be able to be, you know, players of the year at a Division III school in 2 sports.
Yeah.
And be on the field every minute. So, you know, I think that's a great question, though, and I would love to know if there are some statistics that could prove it, but it's tough because you don't really have a list like in football. Women's soccer players aren't truly rated.
Right.
You know, there's a lot of players that don't make those lists that are very, very good, let's say.
Yeah, for sure. So let's spin the conversation. I want to hear about your trip to Vietnam and what you've the travels that you've had, you know, via the U.S. envoys and stuff like that, and how you've been able to, you know, use your soccer coaching and playing to impact like people on the international level. So tell me about Vietnam.
Sure. Yeah, you know, I think it's one of the greatest things I love about sport is it brings people together, and that's true within our country and across countries. And, you know, even with a language barrier, it's interesting. You can still run a training session even if I don't have a translator. I can still get through it even if I don't know another sound of another language, right? Because it's soccer and everybody understands it. But there's a program that was started, I think by actually George W. Bush, and it was called Sports Diplomacy. Mm-hmm. And he created this program, and the travels I've been able to do run through the U.S. State Department's partnership with U.S. Soccer. And the sports diplomacy crosses all sorts of sports, and they do they're partners with the NBA and WNBA, and I think the Tennis Association. They do those kinds of things. They also have the similar kinds of things for arts and musicians and that kind of stuff. But what they've done is through U.S. State Departments will issue suggestion for a program. And they're typically, me being a soccer coach, I'm obviously going to places where soccer is a very big sport, and it's usually we're trying to do sessions for an underserved population. Mm-hmm. So most recently, we went to Vietnam. It was myself and Lisa Berg, who has worked with sports diplomacy through a grant at the University of Tennessee and done some things with the Ugandan women's national team.
Okay.
And so the U.S. Soccer Partnership is that when an envoy opportunity comes out, it gets sent to all of us, former players and those kinds of things, so that they try to match up needs with what the program is. And in this particular program in Vietnam, they requested 2 female envoys because they were working with local NGOs and organizations to try to promote women's empowerment and how sports can help add to that. So the Vietnam trip was really cool. We got to go to 3 different areas, Hanoi, and then to the Son La province, which is right near the Laos border.
Okay.
And then we went down to Da Nang, which is a beautiful recommend to everyone go to Vietnam on vacation because it's super affordable and it's so pretty. And then Da Nang was the beach, South China Sea, and very touristy, and then finished in Ho Chi Minh City, or what was formerly Saigon. And they had us working with a variety. At one point, we did get to go to the National Training Center and see their U16 girls national team train. And we worked with their U17 national team for a session, which was really fun. And then we were doing things with some PE teachers, as soccer's trying to be incorporated into schools. So we were working with about 25 PE teachers to organize, because on the next day there were 100 kids coming in to do a soccer clinic.
Okay.
And so we were teaching the teachers
how to coach,
how to run,
how to run a practice,
a soccer clinic, right? So the next day we were breaking down 100 kids, dividing it up into the teacher groups, and then they were running it and we were sort of organizing. But what was actually really cool about this is the kids included, there was a group of kids with Down syndrome. There was a group of kids that were blind. There was a group of kids that were survivors of the AIDS epidemic, and that maybe they were children of people that passed and orphaned because of AIDS. There was a group of, just orphans. So it was kind of a combination, mixed bag of a different population of kids. And so we were giving them a soccer clinic as a day. And we were teaching PE teachers. They weren't really soccer coaches. So the Vietnamese are trying to get soccer in all of their schools. So this is meant to help, give a little outreach on that. So that was a little unique. It was one of the first times, and on occasion we've done some things with teachers, but this was one where we got to spend 2 or 3 days at each venue working with them, which was a little different. Usually it's sort of a session here, and then you're moving on to the next place and another session for another group. So it was kind of cool to see the teachers evolve over the day and their confidence, and you figure out ways to talk and listen to their ideas. When we show one drill, and we did a team building one, and one teacher was like, "We have one for you guys to do." So
That's cool.
you do that fun exchange, and it's really kind of you just love that. Somewhere in there, my 7th day in or whatever, I'm like, gosh, I'm in Vietnam just talking to a bunch of teachers about what frustrations they have in the classroom, which kind of mirror all the ones we have out on the soccer field.
Yeah.
And how do they handle it? And, it's a great opportunity to exchange ideas. And I guess for me, I always feel like it's a good way to pay it forward. And clearly I'm always about women's empowerment and Asian countries. Sometimes different countries don't always have, the same freedoms for their female population, so it's fun. But I've been able to go, I think I was adding it up, I think the Vietnam trip might have been my 8th one.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize you've been on that many. I remember you telling me a story about, like, I don't know if it was China or you were somewhere and they made the girls go up to a different field because you weren't allowed, like the girls weren't allowed to train on the same field as the boys. What country was that?
That was actually in Malaysia.
Okay.
It was a very conservative Kota Baru in Malaysia. That the women and men weren't allowed to train on the same field because they feared it would be a little distracting for the men to have
women jogging around,
running around. Yeah. But that was Kota Baru, and then we ended up at, they call it KK or Kota Kinabalu, which I felt like I was at West Palm Beach, Miami. And there was not the same problem, and we had plenty of practices with the boys, and I trained the boys. So interesting, even within Malaysia, a totally different mindset from one island to another. But I've spent the last several ones seem to be in the Asian part. Obviously, I just came from Vietnam. Last year, I was able to do China and Tibet. The cool thing about the Tibet part was it was the first ever government-sponsored event that the Chinese government has ever allowed the U.S. to do.
Wow.
And I feel kind of honored that they thought, all right, we'll let a soccer thing come through.
Right.
So we got to do a program in Tibet, which is the first time, the U.S. has ever been able to sponsor an event in Tibet, which I thought was pretty cool. But first one I went to was in the Philippines in 2007 with Tiffany Roberts, which was kind of a cool one because she's Filipino by heritage, and she actually requested and organized the Philippine one. Not organized it once it happened, but organized making sure that somebody in the Philippines knew this was something that they could do, and which was really cool to see her do that. So I've had the Philippines, Malaysia, Bangladesh, China, Tibet recently, Chile, Brazil, Cote d'Ivoire.
Okay.
In Africa.
Wow. You have been all over. I mean, that's to me, I went to Zimbabwe and Zambia last summer, and I need to talk to you about Lisa because I'm going to Uganda in June.
You have to talk to me about her then, yeah.
Yeah. So if you let's talk offline and you can connect me, but it amazes me, that was the one thing, like traveling in Africa, you get in a taxi and over there is like every taxi driver had a Chelsea sticker or a Man United sticker or a Barcelona sticker, and you just start talking about football, and the minute you do that, you like have this connection with people that you would have never met or talked to or anything, and it's just it just amazes me how soccer is has the ability just to break down any barriers between people, and it's just, I don't know, I just find it amazing.
Well, and Lisa said something during our trip in Vietnam that I thought was really kind of profound and true, in that somehow, to your point too, it has a way that you go somewhere to go work a clinic somewhere, and wherever you end up, it's like you're already friends with the people you're going to do that with.
Yep.
Somehow there's already a relationship when you could be total strangers. And, I do think sports in general has an ability to break down barriers. And, obviously for me on a personal level, soccer is the sport, and it is a world sport, and it is a sport that allows you to communicate even if you don't speak the language well.
Right.
There's some pointing and juggling, and you can get messages across. So I think it's an amazing, when I get to say these things, it's like, how do you put into words how many doors athletics and sports can open up, from empowerment to your own self-confidence and self-worth to, just a variety of opportunities. And that's where I think it's great. The soccer world, I think Kevin Bacon is 6 degrees of separation, but it's been my experience in this soccer world. It's closer to like a 3 degree of separation.
Yeah, it is. It really is.
And that, I mean, Lisa and I didn't know each other, but we both know probably 300 of the same people.
Right.
And now we're friends, and then you're going to get connected to her.
Yep.
She started, some programs in Uganda. She's going to be excited that somebody's, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just a way to make this giant world. Sometimes it's interesting how small the world can feel.
Yeah.
In a good way, not in a bad way.
Right.
So
I
think that's one of the gifts.
Yeah. So we're getting close to wrapping up. So what I usually do is I fire a couple of quick questions at people. So give me your favorite playing experience and then your favorite coaching experience. And you've had a lot, so just pick one. It could be like in your top 5. It doesn't have to be the favorite, but
yeah, I think, it's obviously, how do you not have that last 30 seconds shot from Michelle Akers winning the World Cup in 91. And then I'll add to it, the side note is I totally busted and fell face first and face planted on the victory lap. So, even through the greatest moment of history ever, and I'm a superior athlete that can't run the victory lap without
falling on your face.
So
you never told me that. I never knew that.
Well, if Tracy Leone were listening, she's probably wetting her pants because she almost did that running next to me and cracked up the rest of the victory lap. So
that's funny.
As far as coaching, I have to say, there's been a lot. I've had some unbelievable teams, but I guess what I'll have to say is the thrill I get now with players that I've previously coached, that whether they're currently in my life on a regular basis or, somehow we end up passing paths or crossing paths, that, they say things in a positive way that I somehow was able to have a positive impact on their life. And those are just the kinds of things, watching some of my former players that have kids and families and, that kind of stuff. It's just cool. It also makes me feel very old, but it's cool to think that you could have touched someone's life, at a time where maybe it meant a lot to them, and you were just trying to, be the best person you could be, and obviously always go with that. But it's always great for me to hear from former players or know that they were impacted in a positive way by me during our interaction. So I always feel pretty proud and honored to be able to have that kind of an ability on a small scale, because I think people always do come in and out of our lives, and teachers and those kinds of things. And that's where, I've talked about this too. I feel like coaching is synonymous with teaching in so many ways. So
yeah,
it's nice to feel that impact, and it's nice to know that maybe, kicking a ball around and helping someone out can have a different or a lasting impact in another way. So I feel good about that.
Yeah. Well, I will say you are and have been a big influence in my life, and I learned a lot of lessons from you when you were my coach. And, I look back and I catch myself saying some similar things. Like, I told my high school team, you pass out before you die. And I always remember you telling us that, because you killed us on fitness. I've never been so fit in my life. And I just remember you going,
I don't believe that from you. You're always fit.
Well,
so it wasn't a struggle for you.
No, it was. But I catch myself saying that or just different things. And I think, coming through when you came through and you coached me. I think you were like 4 years older than me when you coached me, and
right.
And we were, you were going through your journey of the national team, and like we were going through our journey at Michigan from being a club sport to trying to get it to varsity, and it was so awesome to have like a strong female role model who like didn't take any crap, that like made it fun though. Like, you made it fun for us. Like, we had a blast. Like, I look back and I had a blast, but we worked
we did have a lot.
We had a lot of fun.
It was fun.
But you worked us hard, and we did the work, and we were competitive, and so looking back on those experiences, like you've definitely shaped me as a coach, and hopefully I've made you proud along the way, and I want to just
Absolutely.
say thank you.
That's the thing, you're welcome, and thank you. I mean, that's the thing, Anson gets all the credit on that too, to have other players or former players that maybe wanted to coach or thought they could coach because of that too. I mean, I want to have as many former players coaching as I can, and I think that's a lesson I learned from Anson too. I think I've got this right. He's got so many women, former players that are coaching in college now. I think his next year non-conference schedule is going to be made up entirely of teams that are coached by former players of his.
Oh wow, that's pretty special.
Which is really, and it might include a few in conference now, but he definitely, I think he said something in one of the emails he sent that he gets to do that, and I think that's pretty cool. So yeah, heck yeah, the fact that you're coaching and that you've done some of the things you've done on the female side, and it's not easy being a women's director of coaching at any club. And I think, there's former players all over coaching from high school to those things, and I love that. And that's something that I'm proud of, that if I've been an influence in that and given that kind of role model, we need to do that, because there's not a lot of women role models, even in today's much better known market.
Right.
That's still, it's a tough life sometimes to lead as a coach.
Yeah. Well, we're trying to do our part to, pull those women through the door behind us. So
That's right.
So any final shout outs to anybody? You want to give any shout outs to family, friends, anybody before I say my final closings?
No, I mean, just appreciate you having me on, and anybody that saw the post and is listening. I love having a soccer family out there, and appreciate everyone's support, and good luck to everyone. Make sure you do things that make you happy.
Oh, I like that. Do things that make you happy. And that's what my show is about. Like, I want to have people on that are doing awesome things in the game. And so, Linda, I just want to thank you for giving up your time and for talking to us about your national team experiences and college coaching and recruiting and your international trips and everything. And thanks for being on Women Talking Football, and we'll do our little social media shout outs. So you can find us on Twitter at WoTalkFootball, or online at www.womentalkingfootball.com, and you can watch the replay of the interview on that. And on Facebook, Women Talking Football. I want to thank my sponsors, Soccer Nation, and our affiliates, Soccer Loco and Kings Pro. So, Linda, it's been an honor. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks to everyone.
All right. So thank you, listeners, for tuning in. This is Women Talking Football, and I'm Carrie Taylor, and we'll come to you next Tuesday at 7 p.m. Pacific. So have a good night, everybody. Take care. I don't know. I'm partial to soccer because I'm passionate about it.
I know when I was growing up, we didn't have strong, confident female role models. I followed my big brother around, who's 2 years older than me, and whether it was playing street hockey, tackle football, you name it, I was always on his heels, dying to get in the game.
Say you're going in the wrong direction, because it was halftime and we switched our direction, and I'd forgotten about that, and thought I was on this dead breakaway.
You can get 5 coaches in the same room, and we all thought 5 different opinions on maybe how Kerry Taylor was as a player.
I was a great player.
And then when I got off the field, she would say, "You did so great. I loved watching you play." No matter, I could have the worst game of my life.
And it was the president of the Deaf Soccer Association asking if I'd be interested in the volunteer job that was the head coach of the deaf team. And I actually was extremely excited.
I'm Carrie Taylor, and this is Women Talking Football.